I'll hand you over to Fletcher Tabato.
I call Fletcher Tabato, 5-minute call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. So this budget has cemented in place Nationals' acceptance and reinforcement of their reality of a designated and permanent underclass in New Zealand.
That's right.
So this government is deeply in debt, and the promise of a surplus, well, that surplus is always tomorrow. This budget claims, actually quite wisely, Mr English doesn't actually claim this budget will do anything in particular. It's a plan that's working. So they all planned for Australia's economic decline and a drop in world oil prices.
Yeah, right.
So without doubt, there is nothing in this budget that will fix this government's finances and secure New Zealand's economic prosperity. Net core Crown debt has risen consistently under National and is now greater than $80 billion. What's more, the sell-off of Crown assets did nothing more than undermine the revenue we could have received from these very assets.
Right.
So despite consistent and thorough evidence to the contrary, this budget promises everything will come right in 2017. Isn't that amazing? Just before election. One could be a bit suspicious, Mr Speaker. I suppose we should be grateful that the government isn't promising everything will come in right in 2018. At least New Zealanders will be able to judge for themselves on the evidence if this government can actually keep a promise. Although, to be fair, election after election, promises are made and promises are broken. I tell you what, Mr Speaker, New Zealanders are the most forgiving people I know. However, sir, for the benefit of some members, the budget forecast is actually given a few assumptions made by Treasury, and the assumption that the government has chosen to accept will be everything will be rosy if only a few things come to pass. So what has the government taken as given? Businesses will enjoy higher commodity prices, only moderate wage inflation, reasonable interest rates, and a dollar that works for all of us. Given this scenario, the government will come out all pretty in blue. Higher tax revenues, actually reach a budget surplus and cut income taxes, all just in time for the 2017 election. But sir, I want to point out today that is not the only version of the future. There are several scenarios, and one of them isn't quite as rosy. If, for example, the Chinese economy continues in its slow decline, if commodity prices and inflation remain stagnant, then GDP growth does not materialise and the tax take hits the slides as well. And what do you know? Mr English's deficits will once again materialise out of nowhere in his plan that is working. Add to this the likely fact that dairy prices will remain low for longer, with most of Europe gearing up to produce more milk than ever before with restrictions being lifted by the EU, and National's rosy interpretation of the future is starting to look a shade of grey. I put it to this government that not only have they failed to address the issues even under their preferred interpretation of the world, for example, there is a bit more nominal money for health, education, corrections and other core services in this budget. However, even in National's rosy world, those small increases do not cover the increases in the population, the rising costs of provision, and if inflation rises as forecast, sir, these so-called increases are actually a real decrease. But my point goes beyond this. More significantly, this government has its head buried in the sand and has no plan or idea for any other quite plausible eventuality arising in New Zealand or around the world. There is a real world that needs to be dealt with, sir. I would ask this government to stop trying to bribe the nation with talks of tax cuts coming into 2017. I would ask them to deal with the very real and explosive debt you have allowed to happen and try and reduce your debt with some actual surpluses before bribing the people of New Zealand. Get a plan, stop inadequately filling the gaps, and actually lead this country into a prosperous future. It is well past time, sir. Thank you.
I call the Honourable Louise Upston.
Mr Speaker, last week I was fortunate